When I say the word animals, do you think of pets, wildlife, a zoo, working animals, or farm animals?
The health of all these animals is important, and the Texas A&M Veterinary Medical Diagnostic Laboratory is here to promote and protect animal health through diagnostic services.
We are going to give you an overview of this fantastic and important agency, but first, let's talk about that name.
It's a long one for sure, so from here on out, we're going to call it by its better-known moniker, the TVMDL.
Dr. Dominguez and Dr. Mansell spent some time with us recently to show us around.
By the legislature, they approved us to come into existence in the 1960s. And our sole mission is to provide veterinary diagnostic services to the state. Now, that focus was more so on the livestock side, make sure our livestock, our horses are healthy, but it expands into small animals and exotic animals just as well. We're a full-service veterinary lab, which means we do just about every diagnostic discipline there is available. We also have the capability to test for high consequence diseases, foreign animal diseases that if they come into the country, we want to diagnose them quickly and get them under control, stop the spread of them as quick as possible, and get our livestock industries back to running like they normally do, because we rely on trade and the movement of livestock and animals for a good part of our economy, and we have an important role in that. We also perform some drug testing for the racing industries, horse racing, pigeon racing. Used to do dog racing, but that kind of faded away in the state years ago. And we also do livestock shows. So those competitive animal events, we have a part in making sure that they stay fair. Nobody's using performance-enhancing drugs there.
There are many reasons for running a medical test on an animal. It could be sick, and the treating vet may need specialized tests to determine what is wrong and how to treat it. It could be that the animal died, and the owners want to identify the reason why to avoid it reoccurring or spreading. And it could be a perfectly healthy animal, and the tests are used to verify it's safe to introduce to other animals. Such is the case with horses and Coggins testing, which some venues require before horses can be brought in.
Dr. Mansell explains.
Yeah, so Coggins is the test that we run, but the actual disease is equine infectious anemia, and the biggest sign we usually see is fever, but we don't know why. So the horse has fever, but it doesn't show any symptoms of any other diseases that we know of. And so, but they can be depressed, go off their feed, they can have swelling, like underneath their bellies and things like that. And so those are kind of some things that might make us think, oh, we better run this test and see if they have it.
And I take it it's highly contagious. I mean, we see everywhere we go with horse stuff, Coggins test required.
Right, Coggins test required. Well, because there is no way to actually treat the disease. And so it's quite devastating for those who have an EIA positive horse. And so we really want to keep those numbers down if we can, and also know what's going on around the state as far as that disease goes.
Coggins testing is just one of over 700 tests the TVMDL offers. Its headquarters is in this 95,000 square foot building in College Station, Texas, but it also has labs in Canyon, Center, and Gonzales.
Each day, they get 650 or more samples. These samples come from across Texas, other states, and even from around the world.
Some samples undergo multiple tests, resulting in more than 1 million tests performed each year. After the initial briefing, they presented us with 2 cases to track on our tour to better understand the various departments, tests, and the work they do. The first case involved a horse farm where a young stallion had died. Soon after, on the same farm, several other horses began getting suddenly sick, with many of them dying. With no prior health issues or recent medications, as well as the quickness at which the problem was spreading, the vet suspected it was a feed issue. He discovered that new feed had been purchased from a nearby feed mill, and upon inspection noted it had a bitter odor. With those clues, further investigation revealed some of the other horses in the area consuming that feed had fallen ill, with 2 other horse deaths reported. While the feed appeared to be the culprit, that needed to be confirmed and explained. Samples were sent to the TVMDL, including feed samples, blood samples, and a necropsy of one of the mares. Necropsy is an exam of the dead animal's body. In humans, we would call this an autopsy.
The patient for the second case was Bob, a living adult male cat. Bob hadn't been acting or eating well, and his owner took him to a vet. He was also suffering from reduced mobility, affecting both legs on the right side of his body. His blood work tests were normal, so an X-ray was performed and the vet identified an area of possible bone infection. The vet needed to run additional tests to confirm the infection and find the cause so that the proper treatment could be prescribed. A bone swab and bone biopsies were collected and sent to the TVMDL along with a blood sample. Let's follow these 2 cases through the lab to see how they were resolved.
Testing departments fall into multiple categories. We will briefly explain several of them and discuss how they relate to our cases, if applicable. Necropsy. The dissection and examination of a dead animal wouldn't rank high on preferred activities for most people, but the information gleaned can be invaluable. Tissue samples of all types can be collected, organs examined, and many other clues can be obtained from these exams. We didn't film the necropsy room on our visit for client confidentiality reasons, but it is equipped with cranes, coolers, special ventilation, and other equipment to handle animals of almost all sizes. For our horse case, the only irregularity noted was of the heart. Tissue samples from the heart were sent for more testing. Stomach contents were also collected for analysis.
Luckily for Bob the cat, this section was not used on his case, as it only applies to dead animals.
Virology. As you can guess from the name, this section deals with identifying viruses. Determining the presence of a virus and identifying it is critical to determining treatment and preventing its spread. For the horse case, there were no indications of a virus being involved, so no virology tests were done.
For Bob the cat, serum samples tested negative for any suspected viruses.
Serum is the clear yellowish part of the blood after the blood cells and the clotting proteins have been removed. This leads us to the next section, serology. Serology tests analyze the serum. An example is looking for antibodies. The presence of a certain antibody indicates the patient was fighting off a foreign body like a virus. Neither of our cases had serology notes, but both of them had testing in our next section. Histology. This is where tissue samples get analyzed.
We did some, for both these cases, we did some histopathology. And that's taking those tissues and cutting them real thin and putting them on the slide. And then we stain that slide with special chemicals so that we can see the cells. And we can even put other special stains on there so that it'll make certain parts of the cells jump out and we can see them better.
For the horse case, the histology testing of the heart tissue determined that the lesions were consistent with monensin toxicity. Monensin is an additive in some cattle feed. It can help cattle grow, but in horses, it is toxic.
For Bob, analysis of his bone samples suggested the presence of an infection, but did not indicate a tumor, so cancer was ruled out. but the cause of the infection was still unknown.
So we have some good clues about both of our cases. Let's follow the horse case through, and then we'll come back to Bob the cat. Toxology. Here, specimens are tested to look for poisons and toxins. The specimens could come from the animal, such as fluids or tissues, or the samples could be feed, water, or other materials that the animal could ingest. Sophisticated machines using liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry are used for these tests. They are sensitive enough to detect one drop of food coloring mixed into an Olympic-sized pool of water.
They can extract various chemicals from tissues and from some contents and from body fluids and determine the levels of chemicals in those samples. So if we suspect a toxin exposure, like with these horses, we think they got exposed to toxic feed. We can test their stomach content, we can test their blood, and if they have toxic levels of like various things, we can say that, this would have killed them.
Remember the feed samples and the samples from the horse's stomach contents?
The attending vet at the horse farm suspected an issue with the feed, but given the high stakes, he wanted to confirm that this was the cause, as well as identify what specifically in the feed was the problem. All of the testing on this case was done within 24 hours, and it confirmed that the feed was contaminated with monensin. The fast response of the vet and the TVMDL testing saved many other horses and additional financial losses. This not only helped at the horse farm, but in the wider area because the feed mill discontinued the use of that feed. This case also improved feed mill industry practices to keep monensin-treated cattle feed from mixing with horse feed.
Picking up where we left off with Bob the cat, tests had revealed the bone was infected, but to treat it, the source of the infection needed to be determined.
The path to answers led to the bacteriology section. Here, they attempt to grow bacteria or fungi from swab samples on petri dishes. The idea is to wipe the swab across the growth medium in the petri dish and incubate the dish in ideal growing conditions. The dish typically gets monitored over several days to look and see if anything is growing. When they get a colony of growth, they can use special machines with lasers to measure the protein profile of the sample and identify what bacteria or fungus is growing.
Bob's bacteria test did not produce any growth.
His fungus test did produce a very slow-growing fungus. In fact, it was growing so slowly there was not enough of the colony to run the identification test. For a faster test that did not require a full incubation, the sample was sent to the molecular diagnostics section. This section used a special chain reaction test that was able to identify the fungus much more quickly. Bob's fungus was determined to be Histoplasma capsulatum, which is common among bird and bat feces. Thanks to all of that testing, the treating vet now knew the root problem was a fungal infection, but also the type of fungus involved. That allowed her to prescribe the best antifungal for treatment.
Bob successfully recovered, making him and his owner very happy.
These are just two examples out of countless cases that TVMDL has worked on, providing answers and curing and protecting animals. If you want to see more of these cases, they offer several on their website. We will put a link in the description. We all love animals, but it can be easy to underestimate the many ways they impact our world. They have intrinsic, emotional, and financial value. The TVMDL and other labs like it play a critical role in the mission to keep animals healthy. This was just an overview of their work. To find out more, visit their website and follow them on social media.
Thanks for the visit. See you on our next adventure.